session, How to Land Your Dream Job / Internship. This is part one, which is all about remote networking. This actually started as another webinar that I did a couple of weeks ago, where I kind of talked about all the steps that I took to get my first internships and jobs in media and entertainment. And as I talked to different students, I realized that it would be helpful to kind of go through each of the steps more in depth. So that's where the idea for this larger three-part series came through. And this is supposed to be a conversation. So, if you have any questions, if anything comes up while I'm talking about something, feel free to ask in the chat. And I'll also be opening it up to Q&A at the end. So firstly, okay, what is Creative University? So Creative University was really started as a give back during the pandemic by Peter and Louisa Chadi. Without it, I really wouldn't have landed my role that I landed last year at Bulldog Digital Media. And I'll be getting into that a little bit later. But really, it's a program designed for students, for recent graduates, and connecting people to media, entertainment, and tech opportunities. And I think these industries, probably more than any other, is really, really dependent on relationships and, just building your connections and your network. And we've had a ton of great speakers. We've had Kevin Mayer, who did his first interview after he became CEO of TikTok. We've had Randy Komisar, who is a VC at Kleiner Perkins. And I think the biggest lesson that we've gotten from the students that are part of Creative University, like myself, is that relationships matter the most. And Creative University is a great platform that I encourage people to sign up for. And you can see the URL is up there at the top. So definitely encourage you to check it out, apply, and attend our events. So this is an overview of what we've done so far. We've had 13 speakers. I think this has even gone up since then. Even more internships are being offered now. We were in a session yesterday where Peter shared some new internship opportunities that have come up. So definitely take advantage of these resources and open yourself up to new opportunities and things like that. So really, the whole point of Creative University is that if you want an internship or a job and you're really passionate about it, let us know who you are. Let us know your background, why you're a good fit. And again, make sure to apply, check out the website if you haven't already, and sign up for the emails and start attending the events and seeing, what sort of programming that we're offering. And a quick plug for our upcoming programming. I think this is super cool. We have Perry Bashkoff, who's the head of Instagram Music. He is joining us on Tuesday at 11. And the second and third part of the resume or of the networking series that I'm doing will be next Saturday and Sunday. So part two, which is the same time next week, is on resume and cover letter writing. And then part three is on interviewing, and both of those will be going in depth into those. And really quickly, I'm going to share the links for all of those for people that may not have had that. So I'm posting these in the chat, so highly encourage people to sign up. So there's the link for the Tuesday Q&A with Perry Bashkoff. And then this is for next week's resume and cover letter writing workshop. And then finally, here is the last part of the series, which is on interviewing. So there are the three sign up links. So definitely encourage everyone to check those out. All right, so back to this. And lastly, Peter has released a book that he recently updated during the pandemic called Viral Media, and it's a quick read. It's like 100 or so pages, and it really gives a good overview of what's happening in different parts of media and entertainment and how the pandemic has affected it. And he updated this recently. So, I think one thing that's important is to stay abreast of the news and what's happening right now in the industry. And this is a great resource for that. It's definitely not a boring read. It's not like any dense sort of like industry book or anything like that. So definitely encourage people to check that out. And it's available for free. And all of the interviews and the Q&As that we've done have actually been turned into podcasts. So it's called Fearless Media. So definitely encourage people to look those up. And I'm sure that anyone here who's interested in this industry will find a Q&A with someone that they have been wanting to either get connected to or have admired. So definitely encourage people to check that out. So, just some background on myself. I'm a LA native. I was born and raised here. I went to UCLA for undergrad and really just fell in love with attending live events and going to concerts and shows. And that was really, the only thing I really loved doing and was passionate about. And that was really the catalyst for me thinking that this is the industry that I want to be in. And working backwards from there, I just started spending my undergrad time figuring out different places to work at, to intern at, and figuring out different ways to get my foot in the door. And, this was all without any connections, without really anyone guiding me or anything like that. It was really just out of a love for attending events and, live music and all of that. So this is one of my favorite quotes. It's "Don't let school get in the way of your education." I think a lot of times we can focus a lot on academics in school, which obviously are important. But for me, I always saw undergrad as a stepping stone to what my life was going to be when I was working full time and really working on what I was passionate about. And here are just some of the early concert tickets for events that I went to. Just started out as a fan going to EDC Vegas, going to different Insomniac festivals. And Insomniac ended up being the first place I worked at out of undergrad. So, just took that love of going to shows and turned that into my full-time job, which fun fact now, the place I'm working, yeah, I have a coworker from my first job at Insomniac who's with me here too. So when people say it's a small industry and you never know who you're going to run into, it's very much true. And this is a picture of me and some of my friends at Swedish House Mafia's last show in LA back in 2014, I want to say, or no, 2013. Yeah. So, quick timeline. I graduated from Whitney in 2009. I went to UCLA, graduated in 2013. My first full-time role, as I mentioned, was at Insomniac Events. I was working as a music journalist, so covering all of our electronic events, really covering the scene and the culture and talking to different fans, artists, DJs. And what was really interesting was this was the year that Insomniac got bought by Live Nation. So I had already interned at Live Nation when I was an undergrad, but I also got to see that whole transition of Insomniac becoming part of this larger conglomerate. Then in 2015, I actually moved to Qatar, where I worked for a company called Trimo Theme Parks. And you're probably thinking, how did I end up in Qatar? Long story short, I have some family there, and I really wanted to take a leap of faith and move out of LA and try something new, which has kind of been a constant in my life. And I moved there without a job, and again, used a lot of the techniques that I'm going to share with you to get my foot in the door in the entertainment industry in a completely new country. I lived in Qatar for 3 years. Decided to get my MBA, so came back to the US and went to Columbia. For me, business school was really about continuing in media and entertainment, but also expanding my knowledge base. So my roles previously had been very much in marketing, PR, more of the creative side. And I used my MBA to really focus on finance, analytics, more of the quantitative side. And so I graduated last year from business school, right in the middle of the pandemic in May. So I really, understand what it's like to be a student during this time, to be trying to figure out your next move. Maybe you don't know where you want to work or how to really network or find a job when obviously, the state of the world is not great right now. And it was really through Creative University that I was able to land my role at Bulldog. And this is like a really great story in hindsight. I read an article that Peter wrote in Variety, and I just emailed him and I said, I really liked what you wrote. Here's some background about me. I'm graduating from business school, and I just want to thank you for your time and for sharing your thoughts on the industry and stuff like that. And didn't expect a reply back. And he emailed me back and told me that he was starting Creative University. And it was exactly for people like me who are graduating and looking for that opportunity in media, entertainment, and tech. And at Bulldog, so we're one of the world's first live stream companies. We were started in 2012. Peter connected me to the CEO. I never even interviewed for a job. I did a project, and based off of that, the CEO really liked me and brought me on full time. And it was really through that intro that Peter made that I was able to get that opportunity. So it's definitely something that, I'll always remember. And I'm really grateful to still be able to work in live music and events, on the virtual side right now, and see the industry from a new angle and from a new part that's really growing and flourishing now, during the pandemic. So that's some background about my life journey. This is a list of places that I interned at in undergrad and in business school. You can see it's kind of lots of different types of industries, different roles. For me, I always just thought if I think something's cool or if something sounds like it could be an interesting opportunity, I would find different ways to pursue that. And sometimes it was through cold emailing people, which I'm going to get into. Sometimes it was, just reading the news and finding out about different companies. And the point of this is to really show that there's no one route or one path, and there's different techniques you can use. But one of the great things about interning is that it really gives you an opportunity to try something before you buy it and figure out what do you like, what do you not like, and eventually what do you want to do for your full-time role. So, just taking a step back, like before I get into remote networking, it sounds really basic, but think about, what's the kind of work that you want to do. When I was an undergrad, I realized that I'm going to spend most of my life at work. So I knew I wanted to do something that I enjoyed. And I enjoyed going to festivals. I enjoyed live music. And that was always kind of my guiding North Star of this is the kind of field that I want to get into. And this is the type of work I want to be exposed to. You may be thinking, I don't really have any past experience. Like, where do you kind of start with researching or trying to come up with a list of companies or places you may want to try to get your first internship or job at? And I just started with places that I admired, whether that was festival brands, different artists. And, you can start with the musician that you really like, look into who manages them, who's their agent, who else have they collaborated with, who are the people that really work on the business side for them, and then start looking into ways that you can start connecting with those people. And I think media and entertainment, more than any other field, is really, really important that you're passionate about what you do, because obviously anyone working in these spaces has a connection to the product that we're doing. And that's one of the reasons why getting these roles is so limited and can be very challenging. And also think of, what system works for you. I'm sure a lot of people have heard, getting an internship or job is almost a job in itself. And I think it takes a lot of self-reflection to understand what works for you, what doesn't. Some people like putting in a few hours every day. Some people like, I'm going to block off certain days and just work on this a couple of days a week. Either is totally fine, but take a minute to kind of think about what sort of schedule do you want in terms of your outreach, applying to positions, and also how are you going to keep track of everything. So here's a summary of like the different routes that I took. And, for me, I always say, try whatever you think can work. There's no list of like the 10 ways to do something, even though you'll probably see those sort of lists online a lot. For me, if I found any sort of lead, I would always try to pursue it as much as I could. Of course, like apply to postings online, set up alerts on LinkedIn and Indeed, and really start to see which companies are hiring, and make it a habit to check those daily. And, a lot of times, and I noticed this when I was looking for a job last year, a lot of times people will post jobs that don't exist, or you'll see a posting for, I don't know, some festival tour manager position that clearly isn't happening right now. And that definitely does happen. Not every job is a real one, but I think it's still important to start tracking all of these so you kind of get a sense of different types of companies, who you might be able to connect with at those companies, and use that as one way to just keep on top of all of the potential positions that you can apply to. The second route is cold emailing, which I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about, but this by far is the best way that I've used and the most success I've had. And in hindsight, every single job that I've had, I've gotten through. It started with a cold email. In Qatar, I cold emailed the company that I eventually got a job at. I cold emailed Peter, and that's how I got connected to Creative University and to Bulldog. And I think by far, I've had the most success with this, and I always try to help people, learn the different techniques that have worked for me. I think reading the news is also really important. Sign up for different newsletters and make it a habit to check those out every day. This is one of the best ways to see where are places that are hiring. So, for example, some students have talked to me and said, I want to get into the music industry, but obviously a lot of it is not doing so well right now. Well, if you start reading the news, you'll see that there are certain companies that are looking into buying artists' back catalogs and looking into ways to repurpose that. That's a part of the industry that's really growing right now, partly because of the pandemic and lack of movement in other areas. And I wouldn't know anything about that unless I was reading about all this activity happening. And if I were a student looking to get into the music industry, those would be one of the first places that I would start reaching out to people. But again, you'll only know about that once you start reading the news. So definitely encourage people to sign up for Variety, Hollywood Reporter, Billboard. There's a ton of different, newsletters out there, and you'll start to see postings and news articles saying this person's starting their new company, or this big company starting a new division. Whenever I see something like that, I immediately think, okay, this is a place that I want to reach out to and see if there is any sort of opportunity there for me. Sometimes I've also reached out to HR departments, and understandably, a lot of times people don't respond. They get inundated with a lot of different people, especially nowadays, looking for jobs and internships. But sometimes you can have success through this route, and sometimes it's really about right place, right time. If you email them at the exact time that someone says, I'm looking for an intern to help with this new project, that's a great potential way to get your foot in the door. So, always look into people in HR whenever you are looking on LinkedIn as well. And different Facebook groups. I think this is a really underutilized tool. But just looking on Facebook, I've joined a couple of women in music, South Asians in entertainment, different sorts of groups. Young professionals in media and entertainment, and all these people in these groups are basically joining because they want to connect with people. And I would really encourage people to look up different groups. I've joined and then posted a little blurb about myself and said, hey, if anyone wants to connect, I'm happy to chat. And I've just started connecting with people that way. And I think it's also a great example of reaching out to people and making yourself available without saying, oh, I want something in return. Because oftentimes the best connections that you form are those organic types of connections. Similar to when I reached out to Peter, I wasn't saying, oh, I'm looking for a job. I just said, I really liked what you wrote. And I think that helped us, start that relationship that then ended up, being super helpful for myself. And Sandy posted in the chat that Music Business Worldwide is a great place to find music news. I agree. That's definitely a great resource. They also have a newsletter specifically for jobs. And if you find any companies that are hiring, chances are they'll probably also need interns. So if you see any full-time roles, that's also a sort of signal to look deeper into those companies and those departments to see if someone could be looking for an intern. So where to start? Start with your target list of companies. Think about what specific industry do you want to go into, what specific area. The example I gave of companies that are now investing in artist catalogs, that's a very specific niche, but once you start researching, you'll come up with the top 3 to 4 players, and then you can start reaching out to people in those specific industries and those companies. Read the news, as I mentioned. That's a great way to start coming up with your list. Sign up for job alerts, Indeed and LinkedIn. And I think LinkedIn by far has been the most valuable resource for me in terms of finding people, connecting with people. So Definitely update your profile, start using it regularly. If, you know, I regularly, when I was recruiting and looking for jobs and internships, I would reach that limit of, oh, I've searched for too many people. So, you know, I gladly pay the $60. I think it's super worth it. And it also gives you a good sense of, you know, what are the different sort of career routes people have taken to get to where they want to go. And I always just find that personally very interesting to check out as well. So the art of the cold email. This, as I mentioned, is by far the best way that I found to reach out to people. And, you know, how do you get a job or internship in an industry that you don't know anyone? You start with trying to connect with them. And for me, the best way that I found is through emailing these people. So I'm going to share kind of like the techniques that I've used to find different people's email addresses, which can sound kind of crazy, but I think it's also useful, and it's something that a lot of people have utilized. So, for example, if I'm, you know, say you want to connect with someone at Live Nation. So the first step that I really do is figure out, you know, what does the email address URL look like? So Live Nation is pretty simple. It's at livenation.com. You know, certain companies may have a dash in there, or they may have a co. Generally, if you go to the website and look at the contact email, you can figure out what the ending of the email is. Or a trick is go to the press page, because they'll pretty much always have some contact there. And this is a trick that I learned through an internship that I had, where my job was literally just researching emails. But if you type into Google the end of the email address within quotes, it'll find all of the specific search results that have that exact phrase. And sometimes I'll type this just by itself with the quotes, and sometimes I'll add email in front. But what this does is you can then start to look through and look for different results. So okay, here's an email, care@livenation.com. That doesn't really give us much info. What we're trying to do is figure out what's the email format for people who work at this company. So if you go down a little, this is exactly what you're looking for. So this girl, her email is moniquesowinski@livenation.com. So great, I know that this means the email format is first name, last name at livenation.com. So this is actually a super powerful way to figure out how you can directly reach out to anyone at Live Nation. And from having worked there, I can tell you that pretty much everyone's email does follow this format. Of course, there are certain exceptions, but this is a good way to sort of start. And, you know, just going back to LinkedIn, when I was looking for jobs and internships, I would just start by looking at companies that I want to work at. So I know one of our Creative University students just got an internship at Red Light. So, you know, it's as simple as go on LinkedIn, start looking up the people, and just start going through the list and seeing who are you potentially interested in reaching out to. I like kind of looking at people who are in the manager or director type position. I find that, you know, they obviously have some leeway to hire people. They can kind of guide you, but, you know, I wouldn't necessarily recommend reaching out to a CEO right off the bat. But, you know, really anyone is an option, and you can just start kind of going through and figuring out, you know, maybe 2 to 3 people that you want to start out with, and who do you want to reach out to, and most importantly, know why those specific people. Either they work in a department you're interested in, maybe they went to the same school as you. That's always a great place to start. But really, these are the first 2 sort of steps that I would take, is look up people at companies and then figure out what their email address is using this technique. And then I had a little tracker that I used, nothing fancy, but it's important to keep track of everyone you talk to and how many times you followed up with them. So this was from my job search last year. I really just made a list of all these people I reached out to, the companies they worked at, what date did I reach out to them, did I follow up, and you know, generally, what did they say? They said, okay, they forwarded my application to someone. They said, you know, reach back out later and contact them after. You know, some people will say things like that. And I had a column specifically for did I follow up with them, because every single person, when I would email them, I would always make sure that I followed up at least once if they hadn't responded to me. And I just use this to keep track of everyone I talk to. And it also helps you just kind of see your progress, especially at times when you may feel like you're not getting responses, or um, you may be feeling like things are going a little slow. It's always a good reminder to see, like, no, I have actually been, doing a lot of work, and, just keeping the momentum going. So, yeah, I showed you all how to use this trick to figure out people's email addresses. Targeting middle management, so manager, director level, is people that I generally like to start with. And, even before you figure out what you want to put in the email, the only way it's going to get opened is if the subject line is juicy enough, if it has something that that person will want to open. And the best way to do that is really to utilize any common ground. So the best thing I've found is, if you have a target company, see if there's firstly anyone from your school that works there. And, regardless of position, or if they're in the department that you want, they're a great person to start with, and mention that in the subject line. Mention that you're from the same school, maybe you're from the same fraternity or sorority, or from the same hometown. Any sort of common ground you can use in the subject line, similar to if you're a big fan of an artist that they work for, or a project that they've done, mention that in the subject line. And definitely, I find a lot of people, especially now that I'm on the other side as a working professional, a lot of times people wait for people to follow up before they'll actually respond. And, if you kind of think about the person you're trying to connect with, they obviously have limited amount of time. They probably want to help people, but they also want to know that it's worth their time, and that the other person is really serious about connecting with them specifically. So a lot of times, and I've heard this from other professionals, is that they wait for someone to follow up before they, to know that, oh, this person really is interested in me, and specifically connecting with me and the work that I do. So always follow up. And sometimes I even send another follow up, but the second time that I follow up, I like to add something new to the email. So that can be an update about what you've been doing. Maybe you saw something about the work that they had done, or an artist or some news about their company, and you can mention that. And that gives you another reason to follow up with them, and just kind of stay top of mind, and also, bump your email back to the top of their inbox. So here's a example of a cold email that I sent that I got a response to the very first time I sent it. So the subject line was Columbia MBA grad interested in learning about Yamaha. So the reason I plugged Columbia MBA was because this person, when I found him on LinkedIn, he had MBA in his job title. So that told me, okay, this is something that this person obviously cares about, something that would resonate with them. So again, it's about finding that common ground. A lot of times I would say, fellow UCLA alum interested in learning about their company, or, something about being a big fan of the work that they're doing. Start out with something simple. Obviously, acknowledge the state of the world. Not everyone is even able to work right now. So it's always nice to kind of acknowledge that, you're just kind of thinking about them and hope everything is fine. Explain, just explain your situation, and also personalize the first sentence so they know you're not just sending a blanket email. So I like to specifically target either the job that this person has, the specific field they're working in, so that they know that you've taken the time to research them, and you're not just sort of sending this same email to everyone. Second paragraph, just very direct and also short. I just talked about how music is my passion, talked about different festivals I worked for. This can be anything. It can be volunteer work that you've done, some sort of life-changing piece of media and entertainment that resonated with you, that's also relevant to this person. The more personalized that you make it, and the more from the heart, I think that always resonates well. And then closing, just talk about your situation, and, how you'd like to connect with this person. So here I say, I'd love to do a quick phone chat with you. Sometimes I will say, I'd love to talk on the phone, or I can also email you some questions. Especially if someone's busy, giving them that option of being able to just answer some questions so they don't have to schedule time is also can be helpful. And in that case, I like to send maybe 3 to 5 questions maximum. Probably closer to 3 to 4 is what I'd recommend. But you can see, it's a simple email, direct to the point, directly targeted to this person. So they knew that, okay, I'm reaching out to them because I'm specifically interested in what they're doing. And yeah, like I mentioned, this person responded after the first time that I sent this. So yeah, that's an example of a cold email. Um, so, you send out these emails, you've followed up. Some people have said they're fine, they're open to chatting with you. Um, you know, Even I was doing these last year, sometimes I would get nervous as well. It's really about, practicing and knowing what do you want this person to know about you. And literally for me, that meant practicing in my room. What do I want them to know? How do I want to explain my backstory? And always try to connect it to that person. And, I talk about my background and I'd say, this is why I reached out to you because I was interested in ABC that you've been doing. So always try to tie it back to the person that you're talking to. I think 15 to 30 minutes maximum is generally the time length. I don't really see these going past 30 minutes most of the time, but sometimes it does. I've had calls that have gone over an hour just because I connected really well with the person, and that's also totally fine. Take notes of what they mentioned because you never know. You may reach back out to them if a role opens at their job. You may see that they're a mutual connection to someone else on LinkedIn that you want to talk to. So it's always good to be able to reference back what you specifically talked about. Follow up with a thank you note. I like to send these not right away, maybe a half day later up to a day later, and keep track of everyone who you talk to in that tracker that I showed you all before. And here's just some kind of quick comments on other questions that I thought people may have. So something that I see a lot of people do is messaging on LinkedIn. I find, especially with media and entertainment professionals, a lot of times people just don't check their LinkedIn messages. Sometimes if they're an artist manager, they're getting spammed by tons of different artists that are trying to get represented by them or have them hear their music. And I see this discouraging a lot of people because they're not getting responses. So what I always say is, focus on getting their email first and reaching out that way, because at the very least, they're checking their job email. But sometimes I haven't been able to find someone's email, so I will use LinkedIn, but I always kind of focus on that in a secondary way. There's also other informal routes, Instagram, Twitter. You can always try, there's no hard and fast rule of do this, don't do that. But, I think the more informal the route, generally people are less likely to respond. But if you have connected with someone and, suppose they followed you back on Instagram, like feel free to DM them and see if maybe that can lead to somewhere. My boss and I were talking about this yesterday about how calling people is it's kind of a lost art form now. And a lot of times people are surprised when someone calls them, but, I'm sure we've all heard those stories of, entertainment executives who just kept calling and reached the right person that then got their movie greenlit or got their song heard by the right person. And calling was actually how I got my job at Insomniac. So I'd been cold emailing them. They didn't really have any formal postings online for any internships. So I decided to just call the office. And it turned out that at that time, they were looking for someone to help with content creation. And I had already been doing that at another internship that I had. And, that opportunity would have never been posted and it was only because I called that I got to know that. So, if you're able to call, find companies, find their phone numbers, call people, and also, again, practice what do you want to say? Because, the first minute or two is obviously going to be the most important thing that you say. But if you're really passionate about a specific company or reaching someone and, you haven't had luck otherwise, calling is definitely open. There's kind of a fine line between how do you know you're not being annoying, but you also want to be persistent. And, the way I saw it was the worst thing that can happen is that someone doesn't respond. but I still need to make sure that I'm putting in the work, I'm reaching out to them, I'm following up. Generally, I like to follow up 5 business days after. So definitely within 2 weeks. I wouldn't email someone on a Monday and then follow up on a Wednesday. I generally like to email between Tuesday and Thursday. I find those are the best days because Mondays people have, a lot of work is usually piled up. Fridays, a lot of times people just aren't checking their inboxes as much. So, if I email someone on a Tuesday, I'll likely follow up with them the Tuesday or Wednesday the following week. And then, for the final follow-up, if you see some news article or something that's very current, you can send that right away and say, oh, I read about your company in the Variety article that was published today. But generally, I like to space them out a week at a time. And, people are used to getting these sorts of messages as well. So I think, I like to err on the side of just being more persistent rather than being too cautious and not getting my name out there. Sometimes you also want to reach out to someone because they're connected to someone that you know. So one thing that I should have mentioned before was if you do a phone call with someone or an informational chat, definitely add them on LinkedIn. Um, since you've personally connected with them, they know who you are, they'll pretty much always accept your request. And what that does is that then shows you who else is that person connected to. So you may have connected to someone at a record label, had a good conversation. They may have said, "We're not hiring anyone right now," or "Let's keep in touch, and I'll keep you in mind for a position." Add them on LinkedIn, and you might see another opportunity open that this person is connected to someone that may be hiring. And reach out to that person that you originally talked to and say, "Hey, I remember we talked about 1, 2, 3. I saw that you're connected to this person, and I'm really interested in this internship in their department. Would you be able to connect me to them?" The power of that warm introduction, I can't overemphasize. Again, that's how I got my job at Bulldog, was because Peter connected me to the CEO. And if they do say, they may not be comfortable making the intro. A lot of times people say, I only want to introduce or recommend someone I've personally worked with. That's obviously totally fair, but you want to make sure that you're at least asking. And if they say, yeah, I'm open to connecting you, then make that person's job as easy as possible. What I like to do is I'll send in an email, I'll say, oh, thank you so much. Here's a sample email that you can forward on to this person. And, I always tell them, feel free to edit it as you would like, but the whole point is to really explain why you're a good fit for that role, why you want to talk to that person, and again, make the job of the person that you're asking to connect you, make it as easy as possible. Obviously this program is geared for people that are early on in their careers. So a lot of times it can be discouraging thinking, oh, I don't have a lot of experience. You might be saying, I can't plug, oh, I got my MBA from this school yet, if you're still an undergrad, obviously. But there's also different ways to think about experience. You can think about volunteer work. You can think about certain courses that you've taken at school that could be relevant. Or just like I mentioned, a personal connection you may have to the sort of work that this person's doing. Those are all very viable ways to connect to someone that doesn't rely on having, years of job experience or tons of past internships. So start to really, just think about, especially nowadays when people are very isolated, what can you offer or how can you connect with that person in a very organic way? And a lot of times that doesn't mean job or professional experience per se. So obviously we're in a pandemic right now. The world is changing very rapidly. And, as I mentioned, I was in the middle of my job search last year, having graduated in May. So, how do you really think about networking and connecting now? I think people are actually more available than before. Part of it's because people are working from home. People have more leeway to take phone calls, to connect, to, just talk to people while they're working from home. And I also find that in this time, a lot of times people are thinking about ways to give back, ways to pay it forward. Um, also think about ways to get creative. Think about how you can volunteer to work on different projects, help someone with maybe some admin tasks they may have. If this is someone that you really want to connect with, think about whatever ways they may need help and just try to use that to get your foot in the door. And one big plus is that you're not restricted geographically anymore. So I would look at jobs all across the country. There's really no reason to limit yourself to a specific area. And I would say vast majority of people, especially in music, are working from home nowadays. So that also gives you a lot more opportunity as to who you can reach out to as well. So, from my journey, kind of just cold emailing, reaching out to people, getting my foot in the door at different places, I realized that there's really no one way to get a job or internship. Find what works for you. I have actually never had much luck applying to different job postings. From my perspective, I always thought, I'm applying to this position. I'm going to be part of hundreds of applications that get put in. So what can I do to set myself apart? So that's when I'd connect with people, reach out to them personally, find them on LinkedIn, send them emails. And one thing that has worked for me is always thinking like a marketer. And what can I offer that the other person may need? And how can you say this as concisely as possible so they're most likely to open your email, to respond to your messages, and things like that. And during this whole process of finding a job last year, definitely there was times where I just was not sure, like, am I doing this process right? Why am I not getting any answers? Things just seem to move very slow. It's always the case. When you're on the other side, especially now in media and entertainment, things are changing so quickly as, unfortunately, the pandemic's getting worse in LA, for example, in California. That alone can cause such a ripple effect that can then slow down different processes. So it's good to keep in mind that things move slow, but one thing I always tried to be careful was just making sure that I made sure I kept my confidence up, preserved my mental and physical health, and I knew that I always needed to follow up with someone if I really was serious about connecting with them. And one thing that I always reminded myself was that, if I kept trying, if I kept putting in consistent effort and, reading the news, tracking different companies, looking up job postings, I knew something would come to fruition. I just didn't know what would be the email or the connection that I made that would connect me to that right opportunity. And it turned out it was, the email that I sent to Peter, the getting involved in Creative University. But I had no idea at the time that this was going to lead to that. But I did know that as long as I kept trying, something would happen. And that's always a message that I like to share with people, especially nowadays, and especially for people trying to get into this part of business, because so much of it is connections based and it can seem very challenging. But everyone I've worked with got their foot in the door through just signing up for different internships, trying to work different events, working for free, working jobs maybe you didn't exactly want to do, but you never know what can lead to what will help you. And yeah, with that, here's my email address. I'm always happy to connect with students. After the last session that I did, a couple people reached out to me and, I talked to them one-on-one. I'm happy to help. If you have any specific questions, you can email me. I can answer questions on email, or, you can also set up some time to chat with me. And, I hope, just how Creative University was created as a give back, I hope to also pay it forward and help other professionals, especially now that I'm, have enough years behind me I still remember those days of trying to get my foot in the door, but also now being on the other end and working in the industry. I hope I have some knowledge that I can share with all of you as well. Great, so that's the end of the presentation. I wanted to open it up to Q&A now. So if people want to post anything in the chat, I'm going through it right now actually, or if you want to ask a question, feel free to unmute yourself and you can just ask directly. So Parker said, almost every interview I've had, company has looked at my LinkedIn. Yeah, definitely. I think updating your LinkedIn, if you haven't done that, like that should be the very first step that you take. Um, I did not know about this extension. Chrome has an extension called Hunter that you can search different companies' email formats. That's a great tip. I actually didn't know that, so that's something that I'm going to look into. Um, okay, I I'm going to allow you all to unmute. Okay, I think now you can. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, how did you or do you go about balancing the school or work along with like searching for an internship? Because I feel like just for me specifically, put I have to put in more effort just to do decent enough at school, and then it feels like to me looking for an internship to work between those school semesters, I just like, oh, it's another thing for me to do, and like I overwhelm myself. So it's just like, how did you uh, deal with like that sort of thing?
Yeah, for me, my focus was always professional development. I, candidly didn't really focus on school that much. Like I knew I wanted to get the degree. So, being at UCLA, we had a quarter system. I took 3 classes a semester or 3 classes a quarter. Just kind of focused on the midterms finals week, went to my classes, but didn't really um, do much beyond that in terms of academics because I was more focused on getting the jobs and internships. But of course, I'm not saying like don't focus on academics and things like that. I think it's also a matter of prioritizing and time blocking. I think that always helps. So if you are focusing on schoolwork, put your phone away. Just focus on getting that assignment out of the way or studying for that exam. But on top of that, also scheduling in time to focus on, reaching out to people, researching, all of that. Time blocking, I know, is a big tool that helps a lot of people. So if that's something that you think can help you, that's always a route. And sometimes it's a matter of taking classes that are going to help you just get the degree faster, or that aren't going to be as much of a workload. That was another way that I prioritize my professional development rather than spending a lot of time on schoolwork and stuff like that. Okay, I'm reading Natalie's question. How would you advise navigating? Um, okay, you're working from Canada. Okay, so I think your question is like, if you're international, how do you know who to reach out to? Is that correct? Um, okay, I'm gonna go with that. So I had some classmates at business school who are international students, and they had that same issue. I think when you reach out, you don't want to say right away like, oh, do you hire, like, do you have positions for people that are international? You still want to focus on building that organic connection because you never know who that person can connect you to. That could then lead to that role that eventually, gets your foot in the door. I think certain times along the process, when you do talk to people on the phone, or if you are talking to a recruiter, then I would, just explain my situation, and also talk to other international people. Like if I were you, I'd go on LinkedIn and look up which other people from Canada work at that company and specifically reach out to them and mention, hey, I'm also Canadian. I wanted to learn about your journey. And I'm sure that they specifically remember that time of trying to navigate that system. And they can tell you different leads and also which companies to prioritize based on your situation. And I know these are all different techniques that worked for my classmates who are international, who are trying to get roles in media and entertainment. And it's not to say it's impossible, but you just have to be more targeted in your outreach. So Connie's asking, how do you keep a connection with recruiters? That's a great question. I think a lot of them have been actually very responsive and helpful for me. Sometimes it's just a matter of following up. If you see some news about that company, you may want to connect with them and ask. For example, like I was talking to some recruiters at Disney, and Disney has obviously been in the news a lot for how well the streaming service has done, some of the movies that have come out. And from what I know, everyone who works at Disney is obviously very connected to the product. So you can always use some news information to then reach back out to the recruiter and also kind of remind them of, I really liked the conversation that we had, or, thank you so much for responding to my email a couple of weeks ago. Because also from their end, new jobs are always coming up. So you want to be top of mind. Another easy way to follow up with recruiters is to say, hey, I just saw this new posting. Do you have any intel into this position? That's another sort of way to use something new to then reach back out to them. So Simran says, how do you recommend maintaining the professional relationship after you've connected with someone through a phone call and sent a thank you email? So what I would recommend is first, how do I say this? Like shortlisting the people that you really want to keep in touch with. Maybe you had a really good conversation. They may be working exactly in the space you want to be in, but they said, we're not hiring right now, or, give me some time. So firstly, you need to have that list of people highlighted. And then a lot of it is what I mentioned before, track the news, reach out to them if you see something. Sometimes, like, for example, like I had a professor from Lebanon, and when the bombings happened in Lebanon, I reached out to him and just asked, how is your family doing? And I didn't have anything of, I needed a job from him, or I was trying to use it for something else. But a lot of times that sort of organic and thoughtful way of connecting with people is very, people really appreciate it. Another technique I've used is if I've connected to someone at a company and I see they're doing a big round of layoffs, I'll always reach out to them and kind of just ask, I hope everything's going okay. I've been reading about this. And, people they appreciate and notice when you're in contact with them, when you're not just trying to get something out of them. So, those are different ways that I'd say to reach out. And if someone has responded to you, that's obviously a good sign that they're open to keeping the conversation going. So always think about it that way too. Another way is if you have any personal life update, if maybe you graduated or you took a great course that discussed something that's relevant to the work this person's doing. Anything that kind of reminds you of them, you can always plug that and use that to keep the conversation going. Okay, great. Does anyone else have any other questions or anything specific they'd like to discuss? Yeah, sure, Karan, you can unmute yourself.
Hey, so my question's regarding, you kind of touched on it a little bit when you were talking about applying to jobs with little to no work experience. So based on that, how would you kind of go about when you're switching industries or wanting to switch industries? Because I know, with the current job I have, I'm like product development, or trying to go into music, like content creation, sound engineering. So I can use, some skills from there and kind of transport it over. But how to kind of bring that up in an email or some sort of, direct, like emailing or talking, something like that.
Yeah, so I think I understood most of what you were saying. So where are you currently working at? And you said you're trying to move into music, right? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, and what field are you in currently?
I'm in product development.
Okay.
Which is in, product development, sorry.
Product development, okay, cool. So what I would start with first is seeing if there is, so one thing that you can do is when you're looking up companies is you can see what other companies people have worked at. So is there anyone at a music company that kind of took a similar journey to you? Maybe they worked in product development, maybe they also transitioned to industries. And again, all of that information is on LinkedIn. So I would first start with that and connecting with people and mention that in the subject line, talk about, I'm specifically trying to make that same transition that you made and reach out to them that way. I think a lot of times we also undersell ourselves in terms of the type of skills that we have. You may not think that you have something exactly relevant, but things like data analytics, anything quantitative, general marketing, all of that is relevant to tons of different companies. So try to also think creatively about how you're sort of marketing yourself and explaining your past job experience, because a lot of times it's a lot more relevant than you would expect. And I think in music, almost more than any other industry, a lot of times you just learn as you go along. There aren't really, formal processes or requirements of, oh, you have to have XYZ to be able to even be considered. And yeah, so those are some of the different routes that I would take. And again, finding any sort of connection, like if you find someone who went to the same school as you at a music company, that's a good way to just start that conversation, even if you aren't working somewhere exactly, that's relevant to that company. Another thing also is thinking about how you can use your skills that you have, because if it's a very different industry, chances are they may need someone with those skills that they don't have right now. So thinking about, I did this project in this other industry, but I think it's actually really relevant to the work you're doing. And, you can always send attachments, send examples of the work that you're doing. So I think it takes some time to really sort of just think about how it's relevant. And, just finding any sort of common ground. So someone that's worked in the same industry as you, that's made that same transition, same school, anything like that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah, Parker, go ahead.
I wanted to get your opinion on when you think it's okay to send a resume over to someone who you're cold emailing with, because I noticed on your email you kind of just like gave like a brief little summary of like a few positions you had a background in. Do you think it's off-putting to just drop your resume in an email? Do you feel like only send it when it's requested, or is there like a certain time that you would like think that it's appropriate to slip that in there, or like what your experience has been with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have done the thing where I'll send my resume right away. I think now kind of being on the other side and also getting feedback from other people, it can be a little sort of aggressive. And I think it goes back to when you reach out, you don't want it to seem like you want something out of that person right away. You want it to be more of, I'm trying to build an organic connection. I really just want to take the time to learn and reach out to you. And, attaching a resume, that signals to the other person that you're just trying to get a role. And the first thing they're going to think is, oh, we're not really hiring right now. So there's really no point for me to email this person back because I can't offer them what they're looking for. So generally, I wouldn't send the resume right away. But if they do respond to you and they show some interest in connecting, definitely, you can say like, oh, by the way, I just wanted to attach my resume. And one thing that I also do is I highlight in the email, after, not the first time, but the second, third email after we're going back and forth, I'll put in a few bullet points, high level summary of what I've done, key projects, accomplishments, because a lot of times people won't even open the attachment. So, make sure to use the body of the email to tell that same story. But yeah, I'd say the initial email, I would steer away from putting a resume because I think it can be more off-putting than helpful. But sending a resume before an informational chat that's been scheduled, I think that's totally fine. And if I got that, I would think, oh, this person is really on top of it. They've explained, I have a sense of why I would want to connect with them. So that's what I'd say. Yeah, Gloria, go ahead.
Hi, Anum. Thank you so much for organizing this session. I think it's really cool that we all get to talk about this and learn more about like how to find a job or an internship. But my question today is, I just wanted to also know your perspective. I once had a mentor recommend if you're looking for a job or an internship within, like as a student, to have a business card. And I just wanted to know your opinion on having a business card as a student, if it's more effective, especially during COVID times. I'm not sure how that would go about, but business cards in general.
Yeah, I mean, I never really had a business card. I mean, I had through work, but I never made one on my own, especially as a student. When I was at Columbia doing my MBA, that was another question people had. And some people did get our, professional business cards made. I never really used them. And I think especially in media and entertainment, people just aren't as formal. So sometimes it can almost seem like an industry sort of disconnect, like for example, I remember like we were hiring an intern and someone came dressed in like a full-on suit. Like that was kind of a little too much. So same as like a business card. And I think now with COVID, like people just don't want to be touching and passing things around. So I'd say don't worry about the business card for now. If you are going to some sort of like recruiting or networking event in the future, you can always try to get them made. And what I would recommend is, you know, design your own and get it personalized, have it look different. Because, you know, especially media and entertainment, we're very creative people. So if it's something that stands out or has a story behind it, that can be kind of cool. But I would say for now, you know, especially with the way the world is, I wouldn't really worry about that. And it's, you know, now more than ever, like people, all of our contacts, everything is online anyways. Like most people, you know, use all like digital services, cloud-based stuff to keep track of everyone. So yeah, I'd say focus on that as a priority. Yeah, Simran, go ahead.
I had another question. When do you think is a good time to put a signature to your email? Like if you're constantly going from like one internship to a different one, or should you like wait until you get a job to add a signature to your email?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So I always put my LinkedIn in my signature. That's always a constant. You can put your internship, especially if it's relevant to the next step that you want to take. And, you know, especially if it's a known brand, I think that can't hurt. Also, you know, put your school, put what class you're in. Yeah, so it's really up to you. I don't see, I mean, yeah, you can put your internship. I'd say, you know, why not, especially if it's relevant to the next step that you want to take. And it, you know, it helps you stand out at the end of the day.
Cool. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions or, you know, any feedback on the session, anything else? Anything they'd like to know for the resume and cover letter workshop? Okay, I'm going to put a quick plug for the part 2 and also for the Instagram session. Definitely encourage everyone to sign up for that. So this is the link for the Tuesday Q&A. You know, like I said, these Q&As that Peter hosts really helped me just kind of stay plugged into the industry and stay motivated when I was looking for a job. So really encourage people to check that out. And then here's the sign up link for next Saturday's webinar on resume and cover letter writing. And okay, so Connie says resume design is something I would like to know more about. Yes, that's a great question. You know, it's something when I was applying to business school, I was also thinking, how creative do I want to be versus how, you know, sort of professional and standard. And I think there's no real one way to do it, but I always kind of, for me personally, I always like to do things that'll stand out. So I'll go more into that, kind of explain, you know, different ways that I've done my resume and, you know, how to see it from like the point of view of the person who's reading it. So great. Yeah, that'll be for next Saturday. And yeah, as I mentioned, if anyone wants to connect personally, here's my email again. You know, feel free to reach out and we can set up a time to chat. You know, also happy to answer questions on email as well. But yeah, you know, last thing I wanted to say is just commend everyone for attending. I know, you know, things are obviously really challenging right now, but, you know, if there's anything to get across, I think it's working in media entertainment is a lot of fun at the end of the day. I'm super glad I took that risk and didn't go a more, you know, corporate route that a lot of people may be thinking about. And it's a personal decision at the end of the day, but, you know, it really just starts with building connections. And that's something that we see every single speaker at Creative University talk about, is how connections was how they got their foot in the door, how they help other people get their foot in the door. And, you know, it's all about paying it forward at the end of the day. So last chance for any questions. If anyone wants to say anything, please invite people to the next week's session as well, and the Instagram session. And yeah, with that, yeah, you're welcome, everyone. Great. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for your time, and see you all next week as well.